The amount of stuff that has come out here recently is eye-opening, to say the least. Before we get into today's video, I just want to let you guys know that this video is for educational purposes only. Please remember to be kind to everybody everywhere, in your everyday life, in your home, in the grocery store, and especially in the comment section down below. Please do not show hate to anybody, anywhere. So good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. I hope everybody's feeling good and doing good. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about all of the updates in the Bryan Kohberger case situation pre-sentencing hearing, all of the stuff that has come out that I have seen recently that is confirmation of things that we thought before, as well as new there's a lot. It's been coming out, thing after thing after thing. Before we get into it, though, I did want to let you guys know, if you don't already know, hi, my name is Christina. I do have a second channel, which is Casually Christina. We just do things way more casually over there. I also have a Patreon. My Patreon's for 18 and up, and over there we talk about more personal stuff. We go live over there. There's a $2 tier for all the true crime stuff that cannot go onto YouTube due to their terms and policies. That goes over on my Patreon under the $2 tier. Just make sure you read the full about section, what each tier offers before you join. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Like to Know It. And Like to Know It is a platform where you find links to a lot of the things that you guys ask about, that I use, that I love. Everything from clothing items, skincare, makeup, hair care, workout stuff, cooking utensils, basically anything and everything that I want to link over there, I do. And all of those platforms are linked down in the description box if you would like to come and check me out. So, okay, you guys, it's really hard to wrap my mind around all of this stuff. Now, as y'all probably know by now, though, Bryan Kohberger has officially pled guilty in open court. Since then, quite a few nuggets of new information have come out, and he's actually scheduled to be sentenced this Wednesday. So let's get all caught up before his sentencing. Before we get into it, I did need to let y'all know that everything in this video is alleged. I get all of my information from very public news sources that is already out there. Please go do your own research, form your own opinions. I'm going to be breaking everything down in my layman's terms, okay, through my own words and my own opinions. And we're going to be talking about all kind of stuff, including how allegedly he had been stalking them. We knew that he had been stalking at least one of the students, but now it's seemingly confirmed who he was stalking and exactly how he was doing it, which, just wait till y'all hear this. First, let's talk about Bryan pleading guilty. Now, I ended up taking like a trip to go and see my family at the time, and I was literally watching the court proceedings in the truck on the interstate on the way there. However, I didn't actually have the opportunity to make a video and go over it with y'all then, but we're going to talk about it very briefly right now before we move on to all the current stuff that's coming out. If you watched my last video, you know that Bryan asked the state for a plea deal, and they gave him one. Huge mess, lots of opinions flying about that, but nevertheless, that's what happened. And we were all wondering what exactly Bryan would have to admit to in court and what would be said in order to get that plea deal. However, it turns out that Bryan only had to actually say yes when the judge asked him if he committed the crimes that he was being charged with.
Let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
Did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice aforethought?
Yes.
Now, again, I'm sitting in the truck with my husband watching this, and it was so upsetting. And this is not my family. I don't know any of these people. So my heart goes out to the family and everybody that loved and knew these people, anybody that's involved in this situation, any which way or how, right? But just me watching it, it was so upsetting and disturbing to watch. First of all, zero emotion. Now, I know that there's certain personality types or certain diagnosis that people can have that maybe they don't show emotion like another person would, but zero emotion. Even if you did not do this, admitting to it, zero emotion, was very cold and disturbing. But also, it was just so easy for him. All he had to do was stand up and say yes. Very bizarre. Now, there's a lot of rumors about why he actually took this plea deal. Again, this is a rumor, y'all. I don't know if this is true. But one of them that I heard had to do with his family, because allegedly Bryan Kohberger ended up calling his mom, like I want to say it was around an hour after he turned his phone back on. Because if y'all been following this, you know that Bryan turned his phone off or it went on airplane mode for 2 hours during the time that the crime took place and then afterwards for a 2-hour period. Allegedly, like an hour later, he calls his mom and he talks to her for an hour. And allegedly, that was kind of out of character for him. It is said that his mother was going to be called to testify about what they talked about. Again, this is rumors. Go do your own research, form your own opinions. And his father was going to have to testify about what he told investigators was going on during their travels from Idaho back to Pennsylvania. Because remember, his dad flew there and they drove the car back to Pennsylvania. What I think happened, if all of that is true, is when the investigators first came and talked to the mother and the father of Bryan Kohberger, they just told everything because they're thinking, okay, what is this about? Not knowing that the things that Bryan could have been doing and said would exactly like correlate with a person that had just committed this type of crime whose picture of his car was all over the place. Allegedly, it's rumored that Bryan went ahead and took the plea deal so his parents didn't have to testify because that would be his lifeline while he's in prison. But who knows if that is true or not. But nevertheless, he gets up there and just says yes to everything. And you guys, after 2.5, almost 3 years of this being drug out for the families, all of that, every court hearing, every time they tried to drag it on further, just for him to stand up and say yes. Yes. And the families still not even know what all really happened. Anyways, at the end of that hearing, the judge asked both the state and the defense if they were ready to lift the gag order that's been on this case since the very beginning. And you would think that, yeah, he's already pled guilty. They'll lift the gag order. Who cares? Let all the information out. However, both the state and the defense agreed that they were not ready to lift the gag order. Now, I can understand the defense not wanting to lift it, but the state, I just don't know what their reasonings are. They got to have their own reasonings. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt because I know that their job is not easy either, but it's just weird, right? It's like both sides are hiding something. And maybe the prosecution is hiding something in order to protect the other two victims or different people that were going to testify or something like that. But still, it's weird. Well, the judge ended up ruling that he would keep the gag order in place until Bryan was sentenced. However, since then, lawyers that represent the media ended up submitting a motion to end the gag order before sentencing because it's public information, right? He's pled guilty. So now the media's got their representation, their lawyers saying, hey, legally you need to release this information to lift the gag order. There's no reason to have a gag order in place anymore. He's already pled guilty. Well, a hearing ended up being set to discuss that. During that hearing, which I watched on July 17th, Judge Hippler did in fact lift the gag order. However, he made it very clear that this did not mean that tons of information would just start coming out anytime soon.
At this point, I just don't think that I can justify the continuation of the non-dissemination order. I think the rights of the public to information in this case is paramount, given the fact that a plea has been entered in this case, and so I'm going to lift the non-dissemination order. But I want to point out what that means and what it doesn't mean. Obviously, nobody's required to speak to the media, first of all. Second of all, be clear that the court's prior preservation order to the parties is not lifted and continues to stay in place. And so it's important to understand that those obligations still exist. The other thing I want to point out is that by lifting the non-dissemination order, that does not convert sealed documents to unsealed documents. Documents previously sealed by the court are still sealed. So the court will its intent is to, after sentencing, begin the process of reviewing all the sealed material in this case to determine what should be unsealed and what should not be unsealed. That process will include an opportunity for counsel to register any objections to unsealing documents, specific documents, and request to redact certain sealed documents before they are unsealed, or unseal them in a redacted form. I intend to do that in groupings of documents at a time. As I sit here now, my thought is I'm going to start from newest to oldest because those are the ones that I have the most working knowledge of as to the reason for the sealing of the documents, as well as the content of those documents. And so I think I can get through those more quickly. As we move backward in time, it's going to take further or more extensive review by the court to figure out to obviously review the content of those documents, listen to those hearings, et cetera, and determine why they were sealed and whether that rationale still is necessary or that rationale still requires the documents to maintain that sealed status. And so before everybody gets out their pen and paper and sends in public records requests, understand those will be denied for sealed records until they are unsealed. And that process is going to take time. And I'm not talking days, and I'm probably not talking weeks for that to be accomplished. So I hope people understand patience will be required to get through that, as I'm going to have to review those myself to make those decisions.
And to me, all of that sounds like it could be weeks or months after Bryan's sentencing before we really start to see the previously sealed information start to come out. And I do want to remind y'all that most of the families want to know this information. This is not just the public, not just all of us that have been invested in this. The families do not even know all that happened. I do believe there's one family that just wants nothing to do with any of it. They're wanting to move on. But then there are other families that feel emotionally connected to this. And I can tell you, although I'd never want to be in this position, I never will in the name of Jesus, and neither will anybody else watching this, I would want to know too. But I also want to point out, for those of y'all that may not know, Bryan Kohberger is supposed to be sentenced this Wednesday as of y'all seeing this video. During the sentencing phase is when the families will have a chance to go up and give their victim impact statements. They're going to be giving their victim impact statements without even fully knowing what all happened. I don't know about y'all, but that just don't sit right with me. But nevertheless, I'm not a professional. Who am I? Something else that I thought was very interesting and gave me pause was when the judge said this about Bryan having an appeals period.
In addition, I'm unlikely to unseal much until after sentencing and after the appeals period has run. Now, I recognize the plea agreement includes a waiver of the right to appeal, but as the parties probably know, the U.S. Supreme Court in Garza versus Idaho has indicated the fact that a defendant waives the right to appeal doesn't mean they don't have the right to appeal. And so it may affect the outcome of that appeal, and it may affect the underlying case and the plea agreement, but nonetheless, the right to appeal does not go away because of the waiver. And so I think it's important for that time period to also play itself out to see that it goes the way that I think people intend and expect it to.
Now, it's hard to say what that really means without being like familiar with Idaho's Supreme Court rulings. But here's what the reporter Bryan has said about it.
So what does it mean that the Bryan Kohberger judge said today that even though Kohberger waived his right to appeal, he can still appeal? I'm going to call the former Attorney General of Idaho in a second to get his take on those two things. So, Mr. Leroy, when the judge said that even though Kohberger waived his right to appeal, he could still appeal, we all just assumed that there was never any chance for any appeal. What does that mean?
That does mean that the appeals are and remain final. However, under fundamental due process constitutional rights, every individual, even a convicted defendant, has the right to make sometimes a narrow bilateral challenge upon an allegation, for instance, that he was given ineffective assistance of counsel or did not fully and voluntarily understand his waiver of the right to appeal. An appellate court would not automatically toss that out, but on the record in this case, it would rather summarily, I believe, reject it. So the no appeals rule is in effect for this case, but it can't foreclose a theoretical filing that would likely not be given any credence by the appeals court down the road.
So essentially it would be him having to say, I had a lawyer who gave me bad advice telling me to sign this deal. That would sort of be the argument?
Precisely, or despite what I told the judge, I was so confused and didn't understand what was going on that the waiver of my appeal right was not voluntarily made.
And even though that was said, and even though in my heart I would have to believe that there would never ever actually be an appeal process given, for the families, just knowing that the wording is in there, that there is a chance, to me, again, is disturbing. It's upsetting. There should be no chance, none at all. But nevertheless, because the gag order was lifted, some people have come out and actually spoke with the media about things that they were not able to talk about before. Steve, Kaylee's father, told Ashley Banfield this.
When you said drunk, passed out girls gagging girls, was there something that happened at the crime scene involving gagging that you heard?
Yeah. That's what we've heard. That's why we want to get all these facts straight. So we don't want to have a statement that isn't accurate. But when you have a prosecution that just is okay with covering everything up and not telling you what's going on, it's hard to be accurate. And they've criticized us for not being accurate on certain things. And it's because we're not getting the facts. Parents shouldn't have to beg to know what happened to their kid the last 24 hours of their life. We figured out everything that we could. We got the grub truck video before they did. We got the white car. We got the 112 surveillance even before they got it. We were the ones that tell them to go to these cameras and pull them off. I'm sure they already were going to do that anyway, but we got it before they did. So they were just concerned that they weren't in control and we knew too much stuff. And
did someone with the investigation describe that Kaylee or Maddie was gagged during this horrible crime?
There was some damage to her. There was some damage around her mouth right here, like somebody had pressed in and tried to keep her quiet. She'd been hit multiple times in her head and her skull was damaged.
And this is just what they know so far. There's still so much that these families do not know. And then again, bringing it back to Bryan just being able to get up in the courtroom and say, yes. And I'm going to show y'all a picture too of Ann Taylor, kind of comforting him afterwards with a smile on her face. Check this out. Imagine being the family of one of the victims in the court, and that's all he's got to do while they're living with this nightmare. They are living with this nightmare every birthday, every Christmas, every holiday, every time they see their child or their loved one's face. Every day, every time one of their other children has a kid and one of their children is missing. Every moment of every day, they are living this nightmare. And then Bryan, all he has to do is stand up and say, yes. Then a woman named Vicki Ward did an interview with Megyn Kelly. Now, if you guys don't know who Vicki Ward is, Vicki is an author who actually worked with James Patterson on his recent Idaho 4 book. In this interview with Megyn Kelly, she ends up saying that she believes that Maddie was indeed the intended target.
You do believe that Maddie Mogan was the target?
Was the target. Yes. And, I went and traced Kohberger's footsteps and, the routes he drove that the police know about. And there's only one place you could park behind the house where they all lived on King Road in Moscow. And when you park your car there at this cul-de-sac at the back, the house is no longer there. But when it was there, you had a direct view really onto one person's bedroom. And that was Maddie Mogan. And in fact, I went there one time with a young woman and friend of theirs who lived next door, a woman called Lexi Pattinson. And she would say that she would come out to her car most evenings, because that's where she parked her car. And they all had the lights on, glaring brightly, never thinking that anyone would be watching from the road, and that she would see most evenings Maddie in the window at her vanity, curling her hair, doing her makeup, and it used to make this young friend of theirs smile. And of course, she no longer was smiling when she thought that it appeared from the police report that Bryan Kohberger would have been sitting in his car watching the house at least 12 times prior to the night of the murders on November the 13th, 2022.
Now, in this interview that Vicky did with Megan, she told us something that I had never heard before. She said that the only place that a car could park behind the house was in an area that at nighttime, when the lights were on, you could see directly into Maddie's room, okay? I'd already told y'all before when people were saying, well, talking about me, how do I think that Bryan Kohberger knew where the room was? And I said, well, you could look on Maddie and Kaylee's TikToks and see their videos that they filmed in their room and see the balcony in the background, and you can look at the house plans and see exactly what room they're in. But according to Vicky, she talked to one of the neighbors who said that when she would come out or leave her house at nighttime, she would always smile because she could see right into Maddie's room, and she would see Maddie sitting at her little desk doing her makeup. Because any of y'all that know, if you are outside when it's dark and a house has the lights on inside and there's no shades or blinds or anything, you can see directly into the house because their lights are on and it's dark outside. And so it is believed that Bryan would sit in his car and just watch her. I was able to see right into that room and see whatever she was doing. Talk about the heebie-jeebies. He had really, allegedly, just been sitting there, and she just so innocent. And again, for the millionth time I've said this, these 4 students, all 6 of them in the house, but we're going to talk about the 4 who passed away, were doing exactly what college students do. They were living in the house. Kaylee had just graduated. They were good kids. They were home in their home, ordering DoorDash and looking on Snapchat. Devastating. Something else that was very interesting that a Pullman former police chief has spoken out about here recently said that he interviewed Bryan when he applied to be an intern at the department. Now, he said that Bryan was not particularly personable.
One thing that I was looking for in particular was someone who can develop a sense of trust and rapport with my staff. That's a very important quality in order to be a researcher embedded in a police department, because it's very tough to make inroads into law enforcement when you're considered an outsider, particularly from academia. And he was not particularly personable. He didn't speak in a fluid or conversational manner. And so I just felt like he would not be able to establish that trust and rapport needed to be an effective researcher in the police department. Realized that just his demeanor and his way of conversing, I just didn't feel he'd be a good fit at the end of the interview.
And when I heard that interview, it just reminded me of the Golden State Killer. If you guys have not heard about him, I have a video about him here on my channel, and you can find out about him all online and research him. He literally almost got away with everything that he did, but he was a police officer in his community. And so when he would go break into people's houses and do these crimes and do what he did to innocent people, he would turn around and go back and be one of the officers that was investigating these crimes. He was literally an officer. Creepy. That brings us to Bryan Kohberger's sentencing hearing. Now, it is scheduled again for this Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025 at 9 a.m. local time. Letters went out to the victims' families that basically said that only immediate family members are allowed to give victim impact statements. I would have to assume because there's 4 different victims that did not survive, just them alone, much less the other 2 that did survive. And if they allowed everybody, it would be a multi-day process, which honestly would be the least that they could do, but nevertheless. But the letter also said that these immediate family members are welcome to give statements on behalf of others who aren't allowed to give statements directly. So basically like friends, cousins, etc. The letter also asked the families to send any funeral receipts that they would like to provide because the state will be requesting Bryan to pay restitution, which I don't know how they would ever get it unless Bryan's going to start doing a bunch of interviews, making money and all of that, because I didn't see it anywhere that he wouldn't be allowed to do this. If y'all remember the Chris Watts situation, it was written in his plea deal that he can't get a lot of stuff. He can't make money on books. He can't do all of this stuff. So I don't know if it's going to work the same way with Bryan Kohberger or not, but it is rumored already that he's going to be doing an interview. So we shall see. But imagine the family members having to go and dig up receipts of their families or their loved ones or their children's funeral expenses and turning it into the court for a refund that they're never going to get any daggum ways, probably. But you know, like, who would even do that? I just, it's so upsetting. It's like the people who are the victims, the innocent people here, the families, are the ones that have to do so much. It's heartbreaking. They got to go and get all of this. They had to give the funerals. They're the ones living without their family members, and Bryan gets to just sit there. Either way, I'm sure it's going to be a very emotional day on Wednesday, and I plan to watch it, and I do plan on letting y'all know what happens. So in the meantime, let's just pray for all of the families. Have y'all heard about all of this? What do y'all think? Let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. Other than that, I love you guys. I will be watching on Wednesday, and I will talk to y'all very soon. Have a great day. Bye.